Have you ever set a goal that felt too big to achieve or maybe too small to actually inspire you? In today's episode, I'm going to show you how to set goals that strike the perfect balance. Goals that keep you motivated, focused, and on track for success. By the end of this episode, you're going to know exactly how to structure your goals so that they're big enough to challenge you, but not so overwhelming that you're going to give up. Plus, you'll learn how to measure your progress to stay consistent and excited throughout the calendar year. Before we dive in, if you're listening on the Apple Podcast app or on Spotify, make sure you hit the follow button. And if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit like and subscribe down below. What's up, you guys? This is part 2 of a 5-part series that I'm kicking off the year with to help you attack your goals in 2025 the right way, in a motivating way, in a way that keeps you on track and consistent throughout the calendar year, because I don't want you to be a statistic. I don't want you to be like everybody else, like 50, 60, 75, 80% of people who are going to fall off their New Year's resolutions and their New Year's goals 2 weeks, 2 months into this year. And so we're going to do things differently by approaching it differently. So last week we talked about starting off with the subjective, starting off with what you want to achieve, who you want to become, and why. This week is step 2 of this 5-part series, which is about getting specific. So in the 10-week transformation, this is the second step of the 5 steps to goal success, and I call it setting your success indicator. And the reason why I call it is setting your success indicator is because in part 1, we talk about the subjective goal. In part 2, we want to get specific by saying, what does that actually look like? What will indicate to you that you've been successful by the particular period of time? So setting your success indicator is the thing that indicates to you that you've been successful. It's the measurable, it's the trackable, it's the specific number that will determine whether or not you've been successful with your goal. And here's one of the things, when people are doing a 10-week transformation, sometimes it can be hard to come up with a specific goal. Sometimes it's easy. Sometimes people have a very specific goal that they want to lose a particular amount of weight, or lift a particular amount of weight, or be able to run a particular speed or whatnot. So sometimes it's very easy to come up with a goal, but sometimes it's a little bit more difficult. It's not necessarily required to have a goal that's very, very specific in order to stay consistent. But what I will say is when you do have a specific goal, it makes it easier to be consistent because, number one, it allows you to be more intentional and purposeful with your training on a day-to-day and week-to-week basis. And number 2, it provides you with motivation because you can see yourself and feel yourself making progress towards a worthwhile goal. And when it comes to maximizing our motivation comes from not achieving a goal, but actually seeing yourself make progress towards a goal. And so what the prerequisite then of motivation is having a specific goal. So having a specific goal is not necessarily required, but it provides more intentionality and it provides more motivation than otherwise if you did not have a specific goal. The other thing about a goal is it provides you with a sense of urgency, right? Because if you have a specific timeline, if you have a end date or a deadline that you're looking to achieve a goal by, then you have a sense of urgency. It's like, oh man, I got to keep my foot on the gas pedal in order to complete this thing in a timely manner. You might think that I can't skip today's workout because my deadline is coming up. I can't miss out on this meal because my deadline is coming up. So it keeps you from pushing it off, making excuses, and procrastinating. And like I said, it provides intentionality. Like if you just said you wanted to get more fit, there's a lot of ways that you could do that. If I just said I wanted to be a more versatile athlete, there's a lot of ways that I could do that. I could run, bike, yoga, CrossFit. But if I'm saying I want to run a marathon in a particular amount of time, that's going to provide me with a very specific approach to my training. And then again, if you're more specific, it's more motivating because you're doing things for a reason. And when it comes to us as human beings, we want to know that what we're doing has purpose. If what we're doing is worthless, then we're not going to do it. We're going to be less likely to actually do it. So if we have purpose behind our training, it's going to provide us with more motivation and prevent things from becoming boring, monotonous, and mundane. So let's talk about what that actually looks like. How do we get specific? How do we come up with specific numbers in order to maximize our intentionality, our motivation, and our urgency? Well, we want to state 3 things. We want to state a starting line, a finish line, and a deadline, if possible, because the first step in setting a goal is to understand where you currently are. So we have to have the humility to look at ourselves in the mirror and be like, we are not all that we could be right now. And we are inadequate or we are incompetent to where we would like to be. And so it's like, okay, we need to accept where we currently are, the starting line. Then we want to be like, okay, where do we want to get to? What finish line do we want to get to? And by when? So we have to have the humility to admit where we are, the honesty to specify where we want to go, and the courage to say when we want to try to be there. So a starting line, a finish line, and a deadline. Now, the most simple example of this is a weight loss goal. I want to go from 150 to 140 pounds by April 14th. Another goal could be like, I can currently bench press 100 pounds. I want to be able to bench press 110 pounds, and I want to do that by April 14th. I currently can run a mile in 10 minutes. I want to be able to run a mile in 9.5 minutes, and I want to do that by April 14th. You know, me personally, I'm running the Nashville Marathon on April 26th, and I'm saying I want to be able to run that marathon in 2 hours and 57 seconds or less. 2 hours and 57 minutes, 2 hours, that'd be real fast. 2 hours and 57 minutes or less on that particular date. Now, for a goal like that, there's not necessarily a starting line because I've never run a marathon before. So some goals will have a starting line, a finish line, and a deadline. Other goals might just have a finish line and a deadline. But one of the things that I want to try to run through your head from a mindset perspective is I'm saying finish line and deadline, but most goals, there's just an artificial finish line and deadline. If you don't necessarily achieve that goal at that particular date, it's not like you can't continue to make progress moving forward. Again, it depends on the goal. Like for me, that marathon, that is a very specific deadline. Once that day is over and I have run that race, then I'm done. I've completed that race. If somebody has a weight loss goal, let's say, then when that date ends, if they didn't achieve their goal, if they were a few pounds short, it's not like things are over. You can continue to try to make progress on that goal moving forward. So realize when I say finish line and deadline, oftentimes that's just kind of like an artificial finish line and deadline in order to provide you with a sense of urgency to take action. And then the other part of the specificity of the goal is you want to strike the perfect balance of big enough to make you motivated and inspired and something that would really fire you up if you achieved, but not too big to set yourself up for failure and put an unrealistic expectation on yourself. And so the two words that I use is striking the balance of meaningful but believable. Meaningful meaning it would fire you up and be really meaningful if you achieved that, but believable meaning like you actually believe you can achieve it if you put your mind to it. Again, believable isn't saying that you should set a small goal. Believable is, okay, if I really put my mind to this, this is possible. I can do this thing. It's not going to be easy, but if I put my mind to it, I can actually achieve this thing. And then the other thing when you're coming up with that, striking that balance of meaningful and believable, is you want to ensure that you're keeping in mind the time frame that you're giving yourself for the goal. So let's say, for example, again, using weight loss as a goal. And I'm not saying a lot of people should have a weight loss goal per se. It's just the easiest one to discuss the example of. And so let's say somebody has a goal of, I want to go from 170 pounds to 145 pounds. So that's a 25 pound weight loss. Well, that could be a good goal, but it's a terrible goal if you're trying to achieve that in 6 weeks. It might be a great goal if you're trying to achieve that in 30 weeks or 40 weeks. And so you need to make sure you're considering the time frame of your goal when you're striking the balance of meaningful and believable, when you're striking the balance of big enough to inspire me, but not too big to set myself up for failure. So if you're having a weight loss goal, then you would want to have more of the expectation of attempting to lose anywhere from 0.5 pound to 1.5 pounds per week. And you would want that rate of weight loss so that you can maintain as much muscle mass during your weight loss as possible. Because if you're losing muscle mass, then you're going to be slowing down your metabolic rate and many more things. But just wanted to set that expectation out there if you have the goal of weight loss. But that's how it's done, you guys. Once you start part one, like I said last week, start subjective. What do you want to achieve? Who do you want to become? Why is that? Why are those things important to you? And then secondly is, what does that actually look like? How will I know if I have achieved certain things? So actually, my assistant, who's become a good friend and the podcast editor of this podcast that you're listening to and watching right now, his name is, I'm not going to say his name, I guess, well, his name's Taylor. And in about a year, he's turning 30 years old. And he told me that when he turns 30, he wants to be as strong as he's ever been, as fit as he's ever been. And I said, that's an awesome goal. Great goal. You should. I want you to do that. But when you turn 30, how will you know? Like, how will you know if you're the strongest you've ever been, if you're the fittest you've ever been? And, sometimes you can just feel it. You can just feel, man, feel really strong. I feel in really good shape. But I'm telling you that just chasing after that feeling is not going to provide you as much intentionality. It's not going to provide you as much urgency, and it's not going to provide you as much motivation as if you got specific with what that actually looks like. If he gets specific saying, I want to be able to do 25 push-ups by that particular time, or I want to be able to bench press a specific amount, or I want to be able to run a specific amount or do a specific amount of pull-ups, if you get specific with those things, that provides you with urgency, intentionality, and motivation along the journey, which increases the likelihood that you're going to be successful and increases the likelihood that you're going to stay consistent throughout the process. So getting specific is super, super critical. I wish you guys the best of luck in kicking off your journey of your health and fitness goals for 2025. If you guys want to book a free call with me, you can go to nickcarrier.com and we'll book a 30-minute Zoom call where we'll talk about what your goals are. We'll talk about the challenges and the obstacles that you're facing in order to achieve those. We'll talk about how to overcome those things, and we'll give you a specific plan in order to take action on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis to maximize your chances of success. So you can go to nickcarrier.com, book a day and a time that works best for you so we can hop on a Zoom call and hash it out and get going and get specific and ready to rock and roll. So book a call with me at nickcarrier.com. Other than that, this is part 2 of the 5-part series. If you missed last week, I would recommend going back and checking that out, and then make sure you stay tuned for the next few weeks. Next week, we're going to be talking about getting specific with our weekly habits. Now we've determined what we want to achieve by a specific deadline, but then we want to focus on the process and what that looks like on a day-to-day and a week-to-week basis. So make sure you stay tuned for next week as well. If this episode was something that you enjoyed and helped you, make sure you follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button down below. Other than that, I hope this podcast and this episode helps you get closer to your health and fitness goals. And ultimately, I hope it helps you get closer and closer to your best you.